Director, Kevin Haugen.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon. Welcome into today's Community Comment. I'm your host, again, Kevin Haugen. It's my pleasure to welcome into the Daily Dodge TV studio this afternoon. Our guest on our program this afternoon with me here on Community Comment is the Republican candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37, Mark Bourne. Mark, thank you again so much for coming in and chatting with us today.
Good afternoon. Good to be here as always.
And just a quick programming note, I want to highlight that after our interview today with Mark Bourne here on Community Comment, we'll be airing a pre-taped interview that I had with the Democratic challenger in the race for Assembly District 37, LaToya Bates. That will be aired right after this interview, right around 1 o'clock here today on 95.3 WBEV. But in our first segment, again, we're with Mark Bourne, the Republican incumbent and candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37. And then afterwards, we'll be airing our interview with LaToya Bates right around 1 o'clock. And then just one other very brief programming note. I know we've highlighted this morning a couple of times that we'll be having a conversation with Tammy Baldwin on Community Comment today. Unfortunately, Tammy Baldwin had some prior arrangements she needed to be a part of with Tim Walz campaigning in Wisconsin today, so we had to reschedule that interview to next Tuesday. I think that's the 22nd of October. That will be 12:30 p.m. our conversation with Tammy Baldwin again next Tuesday. But now I want to finally turn our attention to our guest here in our Daily Dodge TV studio today. Again, the Republican candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37, Mark Bourne. Before we dive into a lot of the important platforms and issues, Mark, that you are running on and that are important to you in this race for the Assembly District, I want to give you a few minutes to just highlight yourself. Talk about your work experience, home life, hobbies, service organization affiliations. The mic is yours.
All right. Well, certainly probably not a stranger to a lot of your Community Comment listeners. Have had the opportunity to do this program a number of times and certainly appreciate that. But I'm a lifelong resident of Beaver Dam. I'm born and raised here, went to Lincoln Elementary School and then graduated from the high school. And my wife and I are raising our daughter here in Beaver Dam. I worked for the Sheriff's Department for about 15 years before I got into the legislature. Have been involved in a number of community organizations over the years, like Lake Improvement, Friends of the Horicon Marsh, Dodge County Historical Society, Leadership Beaver Dam. I'm sure several others in the past. I've certainly had to lower the number of those that I'm involved in now that I have to spend a fair amount of time in Madison. Yeah. But still involved in some of those groups I mentioned. And have served this area for 6 terms now in the Wisconsin State Assembly. For 4 of those terms, I've been on the Budget Committee, the Joint Finance Committee, been the co-chair, the Assembly co-chair of that committee for the last 2 terms. And certainly have been honored to represent the area that I grew up in the Wisconsin State Assembly. And as we do every 2 years in these jobs, reapplying for 2 more years right now.
I always ask this question anytime we have a candidate come in, and a lot of times it is a first-time candidate running for a seat. For you, it's a little different. You mentioned 6 terms here in the Wisconsin Assembly. It's quite the tenure. But why are you rerunning? What's still driving you to serve this area of the state at the Capitol?
I think the main reason is that you can make a difference. And I've had an incredible opportunity, like I said, to represent the area that I grew up in and work with folks on a local level. And whether it be, major legislation that has an impact throughout the state, or working with a local business or a local organization or a local individual on a problem they're having with a state agency, those opportunities have been there. And I think there's more opportunity to continue that work. And so that's, I think, the primary reason that I'm reapplying. And when I look back at some of the things that we've been able to work on, that may seem small to some, but they were big to that individual or that organization. And I think that with my experience, I'm in a good position to continue to help with those things and want to do so for 2 more years.
Fantastic. Also want to know quickly, too, here before we dive into some of the more important details or issues, again, that you're rerunning for the Assembly District 37. For most of those 6 terms, it had been the Wisconsin Assembly District 39. This is going to be a entirely, not entirely new district, but there's some new boundaries here. For somebody who's been representing a certain area for such a long time, how has this changed in terms of your campaign to get reelected, and also now moving forward in terms of representing a new area with new maps?
Yeah, it's kind of a good mix of some of the same and some new. And I certainly have had the honor to represent a good chunk of Dodge County for 12 years now. And with the map shifting north, I do lose a lot of central and southeastern Dodge County that's been part of the district for more than a decade. But I still have all of the northern part of the county. Beaver Dam, of course, is the hometown for me and my family, and that's obviously still part of the district. Still have the Mayville area, Lamira, those areas in the northeast. And now picking up part of Fond du Lac County is the big new part. And so it's about 2/3 of my current district, about a third, little over a third new. The biggest new part is the Fond du Lac County municipalities, 5 new municipalities there in Fond du Lac County, including the entire city of Waupun. And so that's a new major population area to add in. But it's been great. I've spent a lot of time this summer and early fall in Waupun, and it's a really good community and very close by. It's a nice tight district now, so that's good for gas mileage and things like that. And the areas are fairly similar. I spent a lot of time doing doors this summer in the Fond du Lac County portion since it was new to me, and found a lot of the same values and things that were important to folks there that I've found in Dodge County over the years. So I think it's a great fit, and looking forward to continuing to represent the areas that I have and then learn even more about these new areas.
Again, with us here today on Community Comment, Mark Bourne, the Republican candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37. And after our interview today with Mark Bourne, we'll be airing our pre-taped conversation with the Democratic challenger, Latoya Bates, here on Community Comment. Looking at some of the priorities, Mark, that you have ran on and are rerunning on, a lot of those involve saving taxpayer money. It's reducing the tax burden for the middle class and retirees. And I know something in the last session that the Assembly met was trying to get a lot of bills enacted into law to help reduce that tax burden. Is that something that is going to be a focus of yours if you are reelected?
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the top priorities, because we built a budget this session that invested in a lot of important areas. My guess is we'll probably talk more about those as we move through today. But unfortunately, the tax cuts that were part of that budget were vetoed by the governor. And we approached him throughout the session with several different middle-class retiree tax cuts. And, he couldn't see the way to them, I guess. He vetoed them all, and that's unfortunate. That's part of why we are sitting on this surplus now. And we need to return some of that money to the taxpayer. Folks have overpaid. There's no secret to anyone that inflation is high. You can see it on your utility bills. You can see it certainly at the grocery store and really anywhere you go. I'm even seeing it on the campaign trail, just the cost of signage and stuff like that. It's everywhere. And we need to get those tax cuts enacted to get more money into your pocket to help with those family budgets. So that's certainly going to be a top priority. I think we'll continue to focus on middle class and retirees. And hopefully we can get that done early in the next session.
Another big component of reducing the tax burden in your time in the state assembly has been fighting against exorbitant spending and spending on things that maybe that those dollars shouldn't be going towards. What are some of the things that you look back to as maybe successes in terms of being able to divert funds into a more appropriate way that will help benefit more people of this of your district, of the state of Wisconsin, and then maybe even looking forward, what do you hope to achieve in that area?
I think this is one that's the hardest, and we've been doing a good job the last 2 budgets of chipping away at it. We've managed to reduce the number of state employees the last 2 budgets, not just less than what the governor asked for, because the governor asked for always an increase, but actually less than what we started with. And I think that was an important thing, to keep shaving away at the size of state government. Government's way too big. It's way too involved in our lives. We're going to continue to push on things like that. Obviously, there are things that the state needs to be running and be responsible for, and things that you need employees for, like corrections and public safety. And, we made major investments in those, but there are a lot of areas where technology is making it easier for people to renew licensing and things like that. And we need to, make sure that our size of those agencies is what's actually needed. And so we've been chipping away at that, and I think that's been important. And another one is the welfare programs. We got to keep trying to reduce those. There's way too many people on the welfare programs right now. The federal government plays a role in that, and that makes it harder for us as a state to really streamline those and make them the way that they should be. But they're meant to be a temporary helping hand to get people back on their feet, and not to be long-term handouts or kind of a hammock that people settle into. And the fact that we still have more people on some of our welfare programs than we did before COVID, and with all the jobs and stuff that are available right now, it's a major problem, and we got to keep working on that.
Mark, you've also in your tenure in the state legislature been a strong supporter of election integrity bills that have come through the assembly. You've supported around 24 or so election integrity reforms. Is that an issue that you still view as something that will carry over and move?
Yep.
Is that a conversation that will still be happening, or is that something that we are in a better spot than what we were looking at a couple years ago?
Well, we're in a better spot than we were, but it's something that we have to keep looking at, because accountability in our elections is essential. People have to have faith in the system, and we have to continue to make sure that we're using every tool we can, technology, policy-wise, to make sure that our elections are accountable. The focus always should be easy to vote, hard to cheat, and that's what we got to keep working towards. And if folks don't believe in elections, if they don't believe that they're run well or safely or accountable, the democracy doesn't work. And so it's too important not to, and we're going to keep fighting for that. And it's really one of the biggest stark contrasts right now between me and my opponent, or between Republicans and Democrats. I mean, Democrats don't even support voter ID, something as simple as that thankfully we have in place in Wisconsin. Most people don't view that as something that's unusual or a hardship. We use our IDs all over the place now to do all kinds of things. It's very common. They're easy to get. The DMV has systems and to help people that need to get them. And so we're going to keep focusing on stuff like that and make sure that people can have faith in our system. And while it's better than it was, there's always room for improvement.
Do you believe ballot drop boxes are an important part of how elections are conducted nowadays?
I think that unmanned drop boxes are a problem, if for no other reason than they create the uncertainty. They make people worry about them. It's kind of like when last session we saw the ballot harvesting in the park in Madison. We can't prove that anything was done illegally or that anything went wrong there. It just creates that uncertainty when you have people running around with ballots in their cars and delivering them back to the clerk because they gathered them in some park meeting. And it just, things that don't make people comfortable with the system are a problem. And so even though some, ballot drop boxes might be helpful and might work well, when it creates that uncertainty, it creates a problem. And so I think if, you can look at stuff like the city of Beaver Dam, for example, they have that box that's for utility payments that's right in the concrete wall, and the clerk can only access it from the inside. I think there's ways that you can make them convenient and safe, and they're cameraed, and they're, like I said, they're built into the structure of the building. I think that we could talk about ways to make them accountable, but just placing them all over the community with a padlock that isn't really all that secure, it just creates that uncertainty in folks. So why do we do that? Why can't we find ways with the technology and stuff that we have to make it easier for folks, but still make it accountable and secure so people have faith in the system. I see those drop boxes as nothing, they're just something that creates a lack of faith in the system, and therefore we shouldn't have them.
We're chatting with the Republican candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37, Mark Bourne, here on Community Comment today. Another important issue, Mark, that you've always been a strong supporter of in your 6 terms in the Assembly, and I have no doubt will most likely be the same moving forward if reelected, is your support for police and fire and emergency services. And is there a need for more funding to support the work that they do, or is it incentives to get people to join up, because there seems to be a talent drain when it comes to people retiring and getting more people involved in those careers? How do you envision addressing some of those issues if you're reelected?
Yeah, I think there's several places that we can work on here. Corrections is one of them. That's an important part of our public safety system that often gets forgotten. And we made major investments in this last budget to increase wages in our corrections facilities, state-run corrections facilities, because of all the shortages we had. I think that's working and moving in the right direction. The next thing we have to look at is some of the support staff in those facilities and make sure that they're paid a correct wage so that those positions are also staffed to help the security staff. That's going to be a key thing that we're going to be, I think, taking a closer look at. In other parts of public safety, I think one of the challenges still is the opioids and the problems that come with that. And, you know, we have settlement dollars now coming into Wisconsin for a few years, and we've been seeing how the state and the local governments are starting to invest those. And so I think we're going to start to get some data that shows, you know, what are the areas that are working as far as either treatment or prevention or education, and what are the areas that are lacking. And so we can target some of those areas, either stuff that we can see working, does it need a greater investment, or stuff that is falling short, what can we invest in to try to help? Because I still think that's, you know, a real challenge for our communities. And you hit on one of them, is the recruitment. You know, maybe that's going to start to get better now. It seems like manufacturing's slowing a little bit. We're seeing some layoffs in the area. But prior to about the last 3-4 months, everyone's been hiring. There's been a shortage everywhere. Law enforcement's no different. But I also think that in some ways law enforcement's really gotten a bad rap in the last few years, and not getting the respect that they deserve and they used to get. And so we need to look at how we can make sure we're recruiting the right folks that will you know, serve and protect our communities. So I think that's something I look forward to talking more with the sheriffs and the police chiefs about, and trying to see if the state can have a role in that.
When it comes to education, is there any sort of priorities when it comes to your campaign and getting reelected that you view as really important sticking points that, if you're reelected, that you want to see addressed or fixed in the state assembly?
Yeah, I think this is always one of the key investments in our state budget, education, and rightfully so. I mean, it's important to the future of our state, the future of our workforce. There's a constitutional responsibility in Wisconsin for education, and it's expensive, and it has been expensive, and it will continue to be expensive. You know, the state spends about $17.5 billion a biennium on K through 12 education. It's an incredible amount of money. $1 billion in new money, $1 billion in this last budget, and then you still hear from the other side, like, we're not spending at all, or we're not spending enough. And I don't know how that's possible with the amount of investment that we're seeing in K-12 education. So I think, yes, there will probably be some new money into education, and there probably will need to be. But the top priority is going to have to be figuring out how we can get more for our investment. You know, why do we still have so many kids that can't read at grade level? Why are we seeing the problems with our test scores? And, you know, DPI now, instead of focusing on how they can improve those things, have just lowered the standards to kind of muddy the waters, to make it look like maybe we're doing better when they just changed the rules. And so we really need to refocus on this. I'm sure that we're going to have to make investments, because a lot of it is labor cost for education, and that's not getting any cheaper, right? That's, you know, it's between the inflation and then the job market the way it has been, we're certainly going to have to spend. but we got to get more accountability out of that system. And I think that some of it has been good, that we've been able to increase funding for the private voucher school program because families have had more choices, and it's made some districts have to up their game a little bit and improve and be competitive. And I think that's probably going to help us naturally some. But, we've got some things we put in place in this last budget to try to help with reading, to try to focus more on the science of reading again. And that's been across the board, not just changing curriculums and the way it's done in our K through 12 schools, but actually changing the way teachers are taught and trained also in our college campuses, and trying to make sure that those are melded more on the science of reading. And I'll be honest, I don't entirely understand why we got away from that. It's something that I've heard a lot about from my colleagues that focus on the education stuff. And we really need to get back to the basics on that stuff. So hopefully we got that moving in the right direction. But the accountability is just going to have to be better. And some districts are better than others. I can think of even districts in this area, and I don't want to pick on anyone, but there's districts in this area that do a good job of putting things front and center right on their website, dashboard, whatever you want to call it, how things are going, where they're improving, where they're not improving. And then there's others that keep it more hidden behind a curtain, so to speak. And it's usually the case where it's hidden behind the curtain is because they're not getting the things done that need to be done, and kids aren't where they need to be. And so we definitely need to continue to focus on that. But it's not all money. There needs to be a refocus on the priorities and, getting back to reading, writing, arithmetic like we used to.
Maybe as one quick side note, I know you mentioned it's not all about money, but I know for some districts it's a big component of how they are able to operate on a day-to-day basis. So when a lot of numbers and data on a day-to-day basis when it comes to enrollment that in grade point average that's tied into state funding, do you think there needs to be a dialogue on how state funding is handed out to districts, that it's districts are not being forced to, but they feel like they have to fudge some of the numbers to be able to get the required number to get state funding and help from the state?
Well, their state funding is based primarily on their number of kids. It's not based on like the grades the kids are getting or anything like that. So it's mostly due to enrollment. And that's where we see the struggles is there are a lot of schools that are declining enrollment. And it's because there are less kids. I mean, their families are having fewer kids and there's less kids in the system. And we see higher education having the same problem in Wisconsin and throughout the country. And so we need to figure out what the future is. And, in Wisconsin, it's local control. The local school district runs the schools, and they get to make all those decisions, including those spending decisions. And the state just sends in a lot of money, and then the local taxpayers send in a bunch more money. And I think we're going to have to look at incentivizing more rural schools to look at consolidation. And that's not so much in this area. That's more in northern and western Wisconsin, where it's a lot more rural. But it's economies of scale, and it's just schools are getting smaller and smaller. It just costs too much to try to keep up with all of the things that we're trying to put into our education system. And the state can't really fix that because it's local control, so unless we're going to move away from that. But if you look at neighboring states like Iowa and Minnesota, they've done a lot of consolidation, and it was different because they were set up different and they didn't have all that local control. And certainly I'm not saying that we're going to move away from local control. I think we got to figure out a way to help locals make decisions that are better for their budgets and for their kids. And that's going to be a difficult conversation. It's not going to happen in the next year or two. It'll happen in the next couple of decades probably. But when your school is getting smaller and smaller, it's just going to get more and more expensive. And it's going to have to take those referendums because the state can't just – when you're based on population, the state can't find a way to just bail out those schools. It's going to have to be a local community deciding in referendum, yes, we're willing to pay more to keep our little school running. And eventually, at some point, they're going to say, whoa, can we keep affording to do this? And it's going to be a difficult process.
We're chatting with State Representative Mark Bourne, the Republican candidate for Assembly District 37. Here on Community Comment today. We are very quickly running out of time here on our program this afternoon, and with the few moments that we do have left, I want to turn the mic over to Mark Bourne and ask why, when voters head to the polls on November 5th, why should they vote for Mark Bourne?
I think I've always promised to take the common sense conservative values of this district to Madison, and that's exactly what I've done. And I have the record to stand by for that, whether it be investing in some of the priorities like we talked about today, like education, other ones that we didn't get to today, like healthcare, local roads, broadband, a number of issues that people tell me locally are important to them. And I've coupled that with some of the things that we talked about today, with trying to reduce the size of government, be more responsible with your money, and reduce tax policy, because that is part of keeping our economy and our state strong. And I'll continue to focus on those issues. It's a real honor to represent the communities that I grew up in the Wisconsin State Assembly. I don't take that lightly. It is not a part-time job. It's very much a full-time job that I put significant hours into, because I recognize the importance of representing you all in Madison, and I will continue to do that to the best of my ability, assuming that on November 5th you vote Mark Bourne for 37th State Assembly.
On that note, I want to thank again our guests here on Community Comment today, the Republican candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37, Mark Bourne. Again, thank you, Mark, so much for coming in and talking with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And just again, another quick programming note. Coming up next year on Community Comment, we'll be airing our pre-taped interview with the Democratic candidate for Wisconsin Assembly District 37, LaToya Bates. That'll be coming up again in just a couple minutes. And as well, another small programming note, our conversation with Tammy Baldwin was going to happen today at 1:30. That has been rescheduled to October 22nd at 12:30 p.m. Again, next week, Tuesday at 12:30, we'll talk with Tammy Baldwin here on Community Comment. But again, want to thank Mark for joining us here today on Community Comment. Our conversation with LaToya Bates is coming up here in just a few moments. More Community Comment is coming up next.